Долго делает свои заключения, это понять нельзя, но неважно. Что могу сказать? Поскольку я вам сказала, человек...
And I tell you, when you live long, you understand a lot about human beings. You have to understand yourself in the first place. And your attitude towards your business, towards your trade, is a very important component of oneself. You have to feel responsible for other part of the life, not only what you are and what you do. And through this responsibility, you understand your own self. And you have to see the harmony of the world in a certain point, even if this point is unbalanced. Myself and Yuri Sinakosov, who is my husband, for over 40 years, so we admire Mikhail Zadornov, and that's it. Elena, thank you very much. Good evening, dear friends, audience. I understand that I have a difficult task. It is Sunday night, and that's the last presentation before your dinner, but still I have to torture you a little bit with figures, because our subject matter is economy, and economy without figures is not possible. Although this is not a specific science, precise science, but still figures and facts constitute its inevitable component. I have three topics to cover. First, where the Russian economy is nowadays, because even the people who take political decisions sometimes do not see our place in the world. You have to understand what our economy is and where we are comparing with other countries. Second, why a rate of economic growth went down, and it's almost nullified. And actually, several years ago, the growth was about 7% per annum. And topic number three is the Russian banking system. What happens with it? Later, I'll show you in my presentation how banking crediting influences the economic growth. It was significant previous years. And in the press, you now see whether sanctions will be taken or will not be taken. It's mostly about the defense sector, financial sector, and oil and gas, which really means that everybody clearly understands the importance of the financial sector and the banking system for the Russian economy. Now, yeah, well, actually, I have to understand how to move slides on. So, the place of Russia, from the point of view of general volumes of economy, in 2013, Russia occupied the 8th place. America is the first, $17 trillion. That's they hold about 30% of the world GDP. Second is China, which bypassed Japan, and it is twice as big as Japan's economy. In 2012, we were sixth. Within 1 year, Russia moved back 2 points, and we were bypassed by France, Great Britain, and Brazil. India moved away from the line 5 to line 10. Russian ruble and Indian rupees were devalued. And this movement in this table relates to the currency rates, but the Russian economy is still big. Line 6 or line 8 means that it's among the first top 10. This is a very serious economy. And second conclusion is that the exchange rate strongly influences the status of our economy, because comparisons are made in current rates and current prices. What is more important for citizens is where we are from the point of view of a ratio between earnings per capita, annual earnings per capita. In this rating, we are 58th, and the calculations are fresh. International Monetary Fund report. The earnings are calculated on the priority of consuming capacities. So you compare the consumers' goods in dollars, and this kind of comparison really shows where Russia or any other country is. So Russia is among the countries with average level of earnings. It is not developing countries, definitely, who are the poorest, but it's not at all the developed countries. What else do we see from here? Such countries like the Baltic countries, Estonia and Lithuania are 45 and 47, and average earning is 20-25% higher than in Russia per capita. In Estonia, it is higher than in other Baltic countries, and we are behind Poland and Hungary and other Central European countries by way of our earnings per capita. We are equal to Argentina, Croatia, and Malaysia, a little bit higher than Belarus. And have a look at the Ukraine, and that's 2013. Before the economic collapse of 2014, Ukraine then was 106, and the earnings twice as low as in Russia. $7,500 per capita per year. This is a very poor country. There is a certain illusion that our earnings grew up for the last 10 years, which is true in effect, but this red line shows the reverse scale. In 2003, it was 61st position. Despite all the economic growth of 2003-2008, Russia was growing up to 55th position. But for the last 3 years, it is again 57, 58. Conclusion here is that earnings were growing not only in our country. At this period, since 2004 to 2008, a number of countries of comparable income also moved forward seriously, meaning per capita earnings. From $10,000 in 2003, we moved to $18,000 per capita. But it was growing with the same group of similar countries. So our movement is not very notable in this regard. Russia is 3% of the world GDP. That's 3% of the world GDP. Our population is 2%. In relation to our population, it is not that small, I mean the volume of our economy, but the territory is 11% of the world land. So our economy is larger than our population, and it is smaller comparing with our territory. The economy is small for this kind of territory. Russia is an export country. Quarter of our GDP is export, and we strongly depend on the international trade. And you will see that import is about 40% of the Russian GDP. So our country strongly depends on international trade. We are purely export country. Russian population. Forecasts were made several years ago that our population would be dramatically diminishing, and by 2030 it would be about 125 million people. So this forecast didn't prove to be correct. And actually that was before 2 million of people of Crimea joined our population. Now we have 143 million people, and the reduction for the last 16 years was not very big. This is current demographic trend, and the low line, that's the population of our working and capable age. So from 2014 to 2022, we will lose 7 million of people in the capable age due to aging of population and loss of incoming strata, meaning young people. So our capable population would sufficiently go down. And then this trend will be leveled, but within the next 8 or 9 years, it will be difficult. And migration growth should compensate this loss of people in capable, workable age. The economy is actually the labor and capital. So number of capable people is a very important factor for any economy, for an economic growth. Migration, official statistics of Rosstat tells us the following. Migration grows in Russia 300,000 people. That's official migration. People who turned out to be Russian citizens, or people who came to the territory of Russia. And there is a second trend here of 2012 and 2013. The lower part of the graph, red part, after the election of 2012, people move away from this country. Officially in 2012, 110,000 people and 200,000 in 2013, meaning the people who clearly chose different countries for their place of living. This is the table of money transfers of citizens into their own countries, like gastarbeiters, meaning foreign citizens who work at the territory of the Russian Federation. This is the precise statistic, that's the payment balance. And Migration Service of Russia doesn't know actually how many migrants we have in the territory of the Russian Federation. They assess the figure with 11.5 million people by the end of 2013, but it's plus minus 2.5 million people. But this figure is more or less correct. In Russia, there were about 11.5 million foreign citizens which constantly work at the territory of the Russian Federation. And this is another distinction of our country. We are the second country after the United States of America on absolute number of foreign citizens who work at our territory, including illegal guys. At the territory, about 20 million such people who work there illegally. Russia is the second country in the world after the States by way of people who work at the territory of our foreigners who work at the territory of our country, including illegal workers. Look where the money goes, which is a significant part of GDP of the corresponding countries. In 2013, $7 billion were sent to Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, $4.3 billion, Ukraine, 3.5 million people worked here till recent events at the territory of Russia. So this was the third country, $4.2 billion left the territory of the Russian Federation. Switzerland, that's official transfers. And these transfers are always made by Russian citizens who have their accounts in the banking system in Switzerland, but 3 billion people is transferred to China. It's not the personal earnings, but rather movement which serves Chinese business at the territory of the Russian Federation, and revenues by way of money transfers move back to China. 2014, this year we see a drastic reduction of foreign citizens who work at the territory of the Russian Federation. Migration service at the 2.5 million people was the figure of reduction. For several reasons. Reduction of foreigners who work in the territory of the Russian Federation, because the unemployment in our country goes down, and that's one of the reasons, because we try to understand what it really means. Many Russian enterprises cut the employ, but evidently the number of migrants goes down as well, and Russian citizens occupy the workplaces of for migrants who went away. These are several peculiarities of the Russian economy. Rates of economic growth were quite good since 2001 to 2008. Average growth was 7% of the Russian economy. Then a crisis of 2009, and we lost 7.8%. We moved back, and in 2013, rates of growth went down to 1.3%. This trend is seen better by quarterly dynamics. This is 2012. From the first quarter went down to 2% in the end of 2012. 2013, slowing down, and 1% of the economic growth in 2014. I also show the expectation of the Ministry of Economy. This is the last forecast, but nobody believes it. So we are not in the recession, as a matter of fact, but we grow up by 1%. Depending on the political situation, we expect from 0 to 1% by the end of this year. And this is slowing down of the development of the Russian economy. There are three reasons for this change of conditions of the world trade and conditions for all raw economies like Russia. Second reason is the reduction of investments, and reason three, consumption boom is no more in our country. So the first reason is obvious. This graph shows the average price of oil, Brent oil. And this graph clearly makes us see the growth of the Russian economy since 2001, 2008, and the oil grew from $24 to $100 per barrel. There are prices for metal, chemicals. You will see similar graphs. We say that our economy depends on oil. No, this is not true. We depend on prices on raw materials. And since 2001 to 2008, all the world experienced super cycle of growth of prices for raw materials. $108, $110 per barrel of oil, Brent, that's what we have now. But this super cycle is over. It will not be repeated. There were not so many such cycles within the last 100 years, or even 200 years. And this period was quite unique, and this was to our advantage, and that was moving the Russian economy. And that's the growth of international trade, not only in raw materials, but all trade. So from 2003 to 2008, the international trade grew up by 8 or 10%. And within the last couple of years, it's less than 3%. This year, it will probably 2.5. And if the world trade goes down, who suffers? The countries which depend on the world trade, the raw material countries, which also sell other goods, and they depend on the international market, and Russia is one of them. And this slowing of the world economy is the first reason for dramatic reduction of growth of rate of the Russian economy. Second reason, that's quarterly dynamics of investments into the Russian economy. It is hard to imagine, but even 2 years ago, in 2012, the growth rates of growth for investments were about 12 or 16%. And there was a dramatic growth of investments. But in 2013, you see that the growth of investments slowed down. In the first quarter of this year, investments were negative, minus 5%. Second quarter, minus 3%. So we expect the reduction of by 2.5% reduction of investments by the end of this year. Why this slowing down? There are several reasons. In 2012, there were lots of constructions like the Sochi Olympics, 1.5 trillion, Universiada in Kazan, about 150 million, so 2 trillion rubles. It's 3 construction sites. Economically, they did not give any impetus to the economy in general. They are very important for Krasnodarsky Krai and Primorsky Krai and for Kazan, but outside this region, the influence on the economy was minimal. But those were investments, and they created speed of growth. But when these projects were over, we see the general reduction in investments. The second reason is a reduction of investment by the state companies. We take Gazprom, Russian Railways, and all followers of RAO-ES, Rosseti, Rosgidro, and so on. In 2011, these state companies constituted about 30% of total volume of investments. Last year it went down to 23%. So all the state companies absolutely reduced their volumes of investments, but they cut them down as share in the total volume of investments, which brought about a drastic reduction of investments into the Russian economy. The third reason is the budget limitations. This week, during all your discussions, you will touch upon the issue of the budget limitations, taxes, and so on. But since 2010 to 2013, consolidated budget of Russia went down, comparing to GDP, by 2 percent points.
And this is quite a serious reduction that affected both the federal and regional budgets. And what you see in green is the bar. It means investments by the state, that is regional and federal budgets. They traditionally account for 30% of all budgets. When we reduce, what do they sequestrate first? Investment, as you well understand, what may decrease by the president, which the governors were not particularly keen to carry out, but now, through several model examples, they were given to understand this is one of the key indicators to evaluate and assess their performance. So, in 2 years alone, the share of salaries and wages in regional budgets went up from 27 to 32%. At which expense? First of all, by cutting down by this investment in the economy. The same applies to the federal budget and regional budget. The investment is cut down to begin with, and this reduces these 20% input by the state into investment. And certainly the obvious reason for this is distrust of all economic operators, of foreign investors, of the Russian business, and of the population, of the public. This is another reason why we see slowing down of investment in the Russian territory. Just look, foreign investment play quite a big role in Russian economy. If we look at year to year in the red, if we compare foreign investment with GDP of Russia, on average it's 3%. Last year was not typical. Last year they closed a deal to acquire Rosneft of a major package, as you know, of TNK BP, and at the same time BP purchased 15% of Rosneft shares, and this acquisition is treated as a foreign investment, although in point of fact this is a deal on, put this way, on exchange of assets. So in principle it's 3%. It's not bad, because on average foreign investment into the economy, whereas countries account usually for 1.5%, but it's half of what we see in China. 6% of foreign investment, this is what we see in China. So foreign investment play quite a serious role in the Russian economy. But, as you understand, regrettably 2014 will be the year of not of the influx, but outflow investment. And this is something that we see. The first half year, the first 6 months, we see both in terms of absolute outflow of capital in red, in blue, and in red is their ratio to GDP. We see that the year of outflow, the biggest was 2011, when $85 billion left the country, as what the payment balance says. But in the first 6 months alone, this is the assessment by Alexei Ulukov, Minister of Economic Development of this country, because the data for payment balance is not available yet. 7 billion for first 6 months. So economists in central bank evaluate the possible outflow of capital, and this year they assess it might reach $100 billion. In point of fact, we don't see the influx, we see the outflow of capital from this country. And alongside with the changing conditions of the world trade and the end and a certain limit on oil prices, the state is cutting on business, doesn't want to invest into economy. This is a negative spiral, because if the economy doesn't grow, why do you need to invest? You don't need have supplementary opportunities to sell your goods. If you do not invest, then the economy does not grow. And this is where we see this negative trend. And I won't really discuss it in great detail. If you have some questions, I'll take them. It's not federal budgets, this is regional budgets. This just shows that 2 years as we executed the May decrease by the president, regional budgets are now seeing serious deficits. It's 1% for the regions, is quite a lot. 1% of all the budgets of the regions. And in point of fact, this is quite a serious problem for the coming 2 years, because regional budgets deficit is rising. The reasons for that are most certainly decrease of 2012. Retail turnover, goods turnover and consumption by the population as the third factor, and the third reason for slowing down economic growth, the main reason after foreign trade and investment. In point of fact, consumption by the population in Russia, this is like today 65% of all GDP in terms of use of capital. And therefore, investment and gross accumulations, some 20-25% year to year. So end consumption by the households, the main driver, the main engine in all the years from 2003 of the economic growth. What is going on in the last 2 years with budget? We saw that the economic growth rates have slowed down. They're slowing down quarter by quarter. Strange as it may seem, where you see quarter by quarter data, really disposable income of the population, given all the slowing down, they were growing. Last year, real income grew by some 3.5%. That was a paradoxical situation, again, because of growing income to the people who work for the budget in civil. The economy is slowing down, but the income is growing. And in blue, the graph, turnover of retail, people just did not get this income. People were very happy to spend it. Retail turnover in 2013 was 4.5%. First half year of the current year, we really first time in the last, we don't look in 2009, that was in the last 12 years, this is where we first see real reduction of income. So given the inflation, they reduced. By inertia, retail turnover is still rising, and it will continue to rise by 2.53%. But the second quarter, the growth of retail turnover is only 2.3%. This is not bad for any country but Russia, where retail turnover, and means popular consumption, where the rates were quite high in the recent years. And these sort of charts, these bars, the number of the unemployed, this is what I was telling you about the labor migrants. This is ILO statistics. You may treat it different ways, but it is representatives. Unemployment was reduced by 500,000 people from the beginning of the year. This, seemingly for the worsening economic situation, doesn't seem typical, but again, we see one of the factors is that Russian citizens, Russians, in part are replacing the outflow of migrants from Russia in some, not all, of course, prestigious jobs. And the last point, I wish to say a few words about banking. Well, first of all, the banking system, in terms of its impact on the economy, has doubled in the last 9 years. In 2005, all the assets of Russian banks were only 45% of GDP. Their impact was not quite considerable. Nowadays, in 2014, almost 90%, 90. It means double of the relative role and impact of banks in GDP. The system grew rapidly, soared in the economic growth from 2005 to 2008. In the last 3 years, growth rates of the assets of the banking system, some 17 to 18%. For that matter, it's not bad, given the slowing down growth rates in the Russian economy. As you see, the banking system is growing and is ahead of the economic growth, but this is 16%. This year we will see it higher, because when external financing is being shut down, so that's where business seeks domestic credit in the domestic market. In red, you see the line. This is return on profit. This is pure net profit per capital of Russian banks. Contrary to the commonly held opinion, it's not a highly profitable industry. The return on profit was very good, about 22%, but in the last 2 years, the return on profit is about 16%. In terms of metallurgy, it's its best years. Ferrous, non-ferrous, oil and gas industry, that certainly shows the banking system lags behind them. But also, don't let's forget that these blue bars, this is the absolute net profit. About 1 trillion rubles. What is it, 1 trillion rubles in terms of net profit? It's 15% of the total net profit of the Russian economy. In other words, about 15% of all profit, given that our financial sector employs 1,200,000 people out of 72. Well, as you understand, this is quite, in terms of its size, it's quite a serious portion of the general profit. What makes it special in the banking system, as we see in the recent years? Well, up until recently, we see very high growth rates for loans and credits to the public, to the population. This is what we see, this boom. In dark blue, we see 2012. Loans and credits to the public, to the population, grew by 14%, last year by 30%. And even now that growth rates are in loan provision still 21%. This is July, year on year, in 12 months. Very good growth rates for that matter, although once again they are slowing down. The business borrowed less this year, but this year they're borrowing less, but again they will still, because external markets for the Russian business have shut down. What is going on in some segments of the market? First of all, let me start with negative things. Buying new cars, this is something is going down, as well as buying used cars is too. Not quite the opposite. Not at all. We didn't see it happen. Just for a general idea, in Russia last year, they bought 3 trillion new cars, including these, and 6 million used. These are deals, 9 million cars bought in 2013. This year, I will show you later on, where in the last we see that the market fell by some new cars, in terms of used cars, the statistics are relative. There is no growth whatsoever, and probably there is a small minus. It means people stopped. It does not mean that they stopped buying cars, no, but they're not that active about this. We expect that the Russian market will fall by 5.5% about car loans. What are people buying? They're buying living. They're buying flats. We expect that this year, in terms of mortgage, 30%. We saw a soar after the devaluation in February and March as people bought more and more apartments. When this went down, the number of applications for mortgage went down, but still, it remains 50% more than we thought 2013. This is this segment of the market. So this is budget and economic class, sort of economical housing. Again, demand for mortgage and for housing doesn't stop at all in every region, and in Moscow and in areas around Moscow suburbs. Credit cards, and this is where you see that growth rates, so 2 years ago, they doubled. This year we think that the growth will slow down, but it will still continue to grow, like 15-20% of no deposit loans. What is typical of this year alone is that our public stopped carrying money to commercial banks, in Russian banks at all. The thing is that in Russia, traditionally, every year people would bring more money for deposits rather than what they say increase their credit portfolio. This is the statistics. Look at the year 2009, 2010. People borrowed heavily, but they bought 2 billion rubles more into the banks as deposits than what they borrowed. Therefore, you can see that the first half year, this is the first when people borrowed some 600 million rubles more than what they brought. So in the first half year, we have negative outflow. And so much for the economic devaluation and political devaluation, the Ukrainian crisis. So people did not replenish their deposits. Thank goodness, with the B24 things are somewhat better. We have inflow, but overall across the banking system, this is also quite serious signal that people can tell you anything, but especially sociologists, but people vote with their money too. This also shows that people distrust certainly to the banking system as a whole and to the economic policy that is being pursued. I suppose the last point I wish to raise here is what certainly plays a big role here, is that people overborrowed. So when this consumer boom took place, it was actively supported by active banking credit and loan. This increased economic growth rate, but it also increased the amount of debt. So this is the total payments of our public on the body of the credit when they would repay the credit in blue, and red is interest in monthly balance of income and expense. If just 3 years ago, in 2010, average people would, from a monthly, they would just 2.9%. But last year, 18% of the income would be spent to repay bank loans. This growing debt would show that servicing this debt, it's already beginning to eat itself up. It means that when people borrow from the bank, they also, to a certain extent, although overall, some people certainly pay, and some people take another loan to repay their first. So it's not much for new consumption as to service the existing credit portfolio. And we think that, again, that the debt load in different Russian regions, and as I'm showing it to you for your interest, you can see that there's certain difference by the order of 2, the factor of 2. If we look overall, this is total borrowings by the public. So we deduct here all basic expenses such as food, lodging, utilities, basic educational, transport and whatever. What is left certain pool of money, and we compare it to the loans and to what they borrowed. The index of credit load has been calculated in Moscow at 60%, in St. Peter's 50%, whereas there are some regions where only 5 to 6%, such as Leningrad Oblast, Bryansk, Ingushetia, Dagestan, and there's Khakassia, where, for example, this load is twice what is remaining, is twice of what the free amount of money that they have. So the regional differentiation is there. So we very attentively observe the credit load and compare our share to GDP, to the total amount of credits. What is special about Russia here? This is 2013. Now mortgage accounts for 5% to GDP. 5%. As you can see in Brazil, 2012, the situation has slightly changed. It's about 10%. Turkey data is comparable. We here belong to the small group of emerging markets, developing markets. Even in Central Europe, mortgage accounts for 20 to 25% to GDP of Poland and Hungary. In this country, this is the data for 2012. What does it say to us? It says that here the space for developing mortgage, as compared to other countries, is huge. But non-mortgage loans, this is where there is no deposit, no mortgage. This is just cash, credit cards, car repayments, car credits, 11% to GDP. We belong to the group where, not on the top limit, but we are quite at the level of the countries with comparable income and comparable level of income. It just shows that we've reached a certain border, a certain limit, where we have to look very carefully at what will follow about the credit portfolio. And again, the last slide I would like to return to the mortgage again. Certainly, under these conditions, it will be the main growth driver for banking credits in the next several years to come. But bank credits, it's the matter of several banks, only 4 banks: Sberbank, VTB24, VTB Group as a whole, Gazprom Bank and Delta Credit. They concentrate 38% of the mortgage credits. So we're speaking about several banks alone. What is interesting here in this slide? This is quarter number of deals with housing. It's flats and houses, which realistically were registered in the Russian registry. As you can see, every quarter, this is grey bars, about 1,200,000 deals with housing take place in Russia. And before the crisis in 2008, mortgage serviced only 8% of all deals. In red, you see this line. In 2011, that was 11, 13, at the end of the year, 17%. In the last 3 quarters, 23%. Almost every 4th deal has mortgage to it. Is that mortgage has really become affordable to some 20%. This is evolution. 20 to 22% of our public, our population. This is something that is really in demand. This is something that works. And again, people prefer to invest mostly into housing, and it's not the first time that we see it in our brief Russian history, into housing deals. Thus, wrapping up what I told you before, the year 2014, what is typical of it? Well, first of all, in terms of weakening ruble, we shall somewhat lose our positions alongside other leading economies in terms of volume. I suppose I've looked in great detail why we see slowing down growth rates for the Russian economy. if we see further toughening in terms of sanctions or maybe mistrust by investors, this year Russia's economy may see negative indicators here. In terms of the factors that have supported its growth and supported 2008-2001, that is growing oil prices and raw materials, and super cycle of the growth rates of the world trade, government, state investments and construction, whatever your take on this. All these factors are now gone. What is left here is consumption by the population, which reaches a certain natural plateau. And since the economy is not growing, we cannot count on the growing budget income too. In point of fact, whatever I told you speaks quite clearly that unless we change the economic policy quite seriously, overall we cannot see the growth rates that could at all compare to 2003-2008. At that, with your permission, I will stop at that, and I will be happy to take your questions. So, dear colleagues, we have 35 minutes to go, and we must use them effectively. A colleague from the second row. Yes, that's... Please remember to give your name. Hello, Bartosz Jagiellonski University from Poland in Krakow. I'm a language student. I'm interested in words, Mikhail Mikhailovich. Recently, in Polish and not in Polish media, we are seeing a great popularity. The word sanctions has become more used and popular. We're hearing more and more, and we may know about them. But we also know and we suspect that the worst weapon in the economic war and in the war is what we little know about. What can you say as a specialist who's discussing these topics in your environment? What's your take on this? What other instruments and tools which we may not be aware of may impact and influence the figures of Russian economy, which you so well described? Thank you. I did not understand your question, I'm sorry. Do you want me to suggest some other secret weapons against the Russian economy? Certainly not. I'm just interested, I think in the audience there are interested non-economists who would be interested to hear what other, apart from sanctions, what other sort of combat weapons could be used against the economy. God forbid. Well, you know, briefly, in point of fact, as always, very much in chess like in politics, the threat sometimes matters more. If we speak about the sanctions, the threat of sanctions matters more than their execution and implementation. Well, several rounds of discussion, to be quite honest, whatever they might say, whatever propaganda might say, certainly we can see, I've already given you data, considerable outflow of capital and falling investment into Russian economy. De facto, this is taking place. This is taking place, in fact. And whether the next round of sanctions come or not, I think that this negative impact, well, in fact, it has taken place. It is taking place. We should be objective about acknowledging it, because we see that in practical terms, almost all American hedge funds and investment banks and institutional investors from US refuse to reinvest in Russia. Those who have invested in Russia, they keep it in Russia, they keep these investments, but we don't expect any new investment coming from the US. Whatever might be said about Asia, about other markets, it's all just fiction. Americans control about 55-60% of all free available money in the world. This is the US market. You can't replace it. You can get foreign direct investment from China, but the Chinese market, Singapore, Hong Kong, they account for 10-15% of free cash flows. All the rest is just illusions. Well, in terms of capital flow, China is more like foreign direct investment, FDI. So the negative impact, well, it's certainly there. It has taken place. Whether it will stay for long, it will depend upon other things from the general political situation and other policy. What I'm worried most about, that certainly we have seen very dramatic change in attitude towards Russia, cardinal change, and we're still poorly aware to how bad is Russia now perceived in the world today. And this perception, this is more important. Sanctions, yes, this is some deliberation. The attitude towards the country is very important. Russia's lost seriously in terms of its attractiveness for investment in the last year. To be quite honest, this is what worries me as an economist, as a Russian citizen. This is something that worries me most. Timofey Grigoriuk from Yaroslavl. My question would be more technical. Going back to raw materials and oil and gas prices, could you please describe which players in the global market are interested in raising or lowering prices? For example, the US, as far as I know, for the first time in the near future, they started to export their energy resources, shale gas and whatever. So how will this impact the situation in mid-term? How will it impact the prices on oil and energy resources? And how will it influence Russia's policy, in both economy and policy in Russia? Well, briefly speaking, don't let's go into detail. The global market is controlled certainly by the United States, Russia and OPEC, Saudi Arabia, first and foremost. Saudi Arabia, whose budget is balanced at oil prices at $95 per barrel. A very difficult domestic situation. In a number of Arab countries, the budget balances, if oil prices are at $105 per barrel, they're not interested in falling oil prices. The situation in Saudi and Qatar, the situation domestically is very difficult.
Well, second, United States is not going to export their oil and gas. There were some pilot sales from the strategic reserves. That's the oil that is pumped into special dedicated reservoirs. But it's just a signal, because to imagine that those reserves will play a significant part in the global market, well, it's not serious, but the story about the export of the shale gas is not realistic as well. Facilities to liquefy the gases are to be built, and so in the best situation they can start it in 2018, and us and the International Energy Agency believe that the price of 110 will stay at that level for the next 4 years at least. Your question, please. Your question, and then that of your neighbor. I'm Lin Roman from Vologda. Thank you very much for a very substantive report. I wonder if the situation is normal when the leverage rates of the population is more than 200%, and what measures are taken to meet that challenge? Well, in excess of 200%. I was speaking about the population only, and that's not normal. Mostly it's about the Republic of Khakassia. In general, it's less than 100%. And overall, I think that the market in the next year and a half will overcome that peak of payments due that we are witnessing this year. Because the banks, starting from summer 2013, made their attitudes to loans much more stringent. So 4 or 5 million people who are over-leveraged will not be able to take new loans. They'll have to restructure their loans and address those challenges. The number of new loans is reducing, and very gradually that lending peak is coming to a close, and the central bank makes all the efforts to address that issue. I'm not going to give you technical details, but those banks who deal with consumer loans only are faced now with much more stringent requirements, and starting from last October, they are slowing down their activities there. And so the point is that the portfolio of consumer loans will continue to dominate in the next year and a half, and then the situation will be normalized. I'm Vasily Kropotkin from Khabarovsk. Mikhail Mikhailovich, thank you very much for your presentation. It's said that Khabarovsk is the third from the bottom. They don't have to give all the wages and salaries. Well, it's not all the salaries. It's the free money after all basic costs. Today we had a lecture that was entitled Homeland or the Truth, and MP Sergei Petrov was discussing with us the point if we have to lie or tell the truth. Okay, I'm talking about new economic zones 2.6, the project of advanced economic areas that is to be launched in the Russian Far East. I wonder if you believe in that. I don't believe in that, but still, I don't believe in any concept of special economic zones. I don't believe in it. It's just it's a mystification of true economic policies. First, there were free economic zones, now special advanced economic zone, gambling zones, and you know that in the Lazovy, in the Russian Far East, there is one. Another zone is Altai. None of them saw any significant investments. Now they're talking about creating such zones in the Crimea or in Sochi. Well, just because of that list, you can see that it's not serious. If they had focused on a single zone, they could complete something, but clarification. A couple of weeks before, Evgeny Orlov, who heads the VTB branch in Khabarovsk, said that the VTB was prepared to invest in logistic terminals to attract foreign investors so that the flow of goods would be accelerated. While business community didn't welcome that, so I wonder, what are you really interested in terms of investments? We are prepared to invest in those projects that pay back and that ensure that return on investments. So VTB 24, my bank, we have one of the best chains, and it's not only in Khabarovsk and the Far East. So any new office costs are to be paid back in 2 years and a half. If it's not the case, we don't invest. So we exercise the purely economic approach. We have representatives from the Golitsyno politics. Please, the floor is yours. I'm Alexei Yermakov from Golitsyno, and Mikhail Mikhailovich, we know that the free funds are kept in treasuries, in securities, in currencies. Is it positive for Russian economy, or will it be positive for the Russian economy if those funds are deposited inside the country? Will it be better for business then, in terms of lending? Well, first of all, I would dismiss your point about our deposits in foreign currencies or treasuries. It's only 25%. 25% of the welfare fund is already deposited in this country. And in terms of welfare fund, the decision was taken that first 40 and now 60% of all the amounts of the funds can be deposited and used in this country. It is about the upgrade of the BAM railway, the Transsib railway, and that rapid railway from Moscow to Kazan. Those are the projects that are supposed to be financed from the welfare fund. So de facto, the process is already underway. Speaking about the reserve fund, the idea of setting it up and the story of the Norwegian oil fund and other funds of the kind tells us that the ultimate objective is to mitigate risks of the Russian economy. So if oil prices drop, if some other negative events happen, it doesn't mean that the situation is bad in all the countries. In some countries it may be better. And the idea of those funds is so to have them available, to have them ready if in Russia situation is not beneficial, we can invest it elsewhere. And even in conventional terms, you cannot put, as we say, all the eggs in a single basket. That's the fundamental principle, and all those who oppose such a policy, they are just the lobbyists of higher state expenditures. It's counterproductive. That policy runs counter to the basic principles of reserve funds. And those funds stay in some countries for 20 years, and they have already proved how beneficial they are. And sometimes they even invest in Russia. In Norway, they invested $8 billion in Russia, although they're thinking to get those money back. But they invested even in my bank and my stock. We have a lot of direct investments from China, from Arab countries. You know, we invest in foreign assets, but welfare funds, sovereign funds of other countries invest in Russia. That's the universal policy, and so I don't think it's appropriate to give up those things that have proved to be beneficial. You, please. I'm Elena Rimaronenko from Golitsyno. I'm also a deputy. Said that unless economic policy is changed, we will not be able to reach the growth rates of 2010. What steps are to be made to change that policy, and why they have not been taken yet? You know, I'm afraid that if I start deliberating on that particular aspect, there will be no time for other questions. But in brief, I can, from my perspective, I would say that the government is to play a lower role in national economy. I'm certain that we can cut a number of inefficient expenditures, and we can get rid of a number of quasi-governmental institutions that were set up in the recent years. So what I can see in Russian economy is just the budget and the private business, and all other layers, they do not produce benefits for the country, and they are to be just shut down. And business is supposed to get a very clear political and economic signal that public relies on that business. So far, the signals that they receive are quite the opposite. So in brief, it's like that. And we had multiple discussions of pension reforms, education reforms, but things do not go further than just those discussions. And those proposals have been articulated on a number of occasions. The only thing is to implement them. Why it's not being done? I think those decision makers, they do not think along those lines, which, in my perspective, can change the situation for the better. So that's about true people's belief. You, please, from the third row. I'm Alexander Efremov from the Mariel Republic. I would like to ask about the collaboration between the civic society and the banking sector. As an introduction, I can say that in November 2013, Nikolai Kostin, the VTB head, said that in Mariel refinery, the owners of the refinery has stolen $7 billion from VTB. And regional journalists in the next 7 months published a number of materials telling that the refinery is withdrawing capitals from the facility, and try to pay attention to that on the part of VTB. So still, VTB is trying to get those money back, those $7 billion. But it shows that civic society was not taken seriously by VTB. That's why I would like to ask if there is any kind of collaboration or cooperation between banking sector and civic society. And even Mr. Kostin made a statement that he was going to build a website, post all the materials on such investigations, such cases. I think you are right by saying that credit experts of any bank, VTB included, are supposed to track and monitor very closely such situations using press materials and other sources. Civic society, from my perspective, when credit experts and security experts of a bank begin learning those news from the press, when there are such cases as this Mariel refinery, then certainly it's not a good characteristic of those experts. And we do need that information, but we should get such news earlier than civic society. As for the Mariel refinery, the situation is quite clear. Actually, the facility was under arrest, and it took half a year for the owners to withdraw assets and transfer them to some other legal entities in offshore economies. And those activities were stopped, and now the refinery is about to be launched or relaunched again. And as you know, the situation in the Republic is such that the refinery has been idling since November, and other companies came to the market in the Republic and replaced the share of that refinery in that market. So for VTB, the ultimate task is not only to relaunch the operation of the refinery, but to see to it that the products of the refinery are in demand in the market. And judging from the reports that we are receiving, that refinery will start operating. And for the Mariel Republic, that refinery contribution in terms of taxes is 20% of all the budget. So we don't think that the situation is tolerable, and we see to it that the problem will be addressed. Dear colleagues, but please don't be too practical. Keep in mind the title of the presentation. I understand that in all your republics there are such cases as that with the refinery, but still. Well, you sitting at the end of the room. Zavarot Rashidov from the Dagestan Republic, and thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. You made a point about the mistrust of the public to banks. Are there any ways to restore that trust? Well, people mostly believe in their practical experience, and just look over the year, or just 3 quarters of the year, about 300 licenses of the banks were withdrawn, and compensations are paid through other banks, through our banks too, and it makes people confident that they will be compensated, their deposits will be compensated at least up to the amount of 700,000. So that shows that people believe in true mechanisms. Why do people invest in real estate, in movable property? Sometimes it's rational, sometimes it is not, but they believe that such investments will protect, will save their money. So the task of the business is to maintain that confidence, maintain that trust through the execution of contracts, agreements. That's it's like this. So we are supposed to provide quality services and keep to the terms of those contracts and agreements. And to my regret, it's not always the case that even informal we have those terms, and to say the least. Okay, the guy next to the one from Khabarovsk. Good evening. I'm Alexander Varvarsky from Poland. I'm going to ask a question about sanctions. It's not sanctions, really. It will be not very much actual relevant question. I would like to ask about demography. On your slide, you showed us that the forecast is even more optimistic than it used to be several years ago. And in Poland, we are seeing some materials that the demographic policy of Russian authorities have proved to be efficient, and some positive changes are visible. So I would like you to comment on that. And second question, you said that many migrants left Russia. What were the reasons? What made them leave the country? What made it possible to see 2 million migrant workers leaving the country? I will not be able to answer the second question. I think you know that since from January 1st, 2015, the Russian Federal Migration Services, I'm not certain about all the countries, but in most cases, foreigners from Central Asia and Trans-Caucasus republics to enter Russia will have to produce their foreign international passports. Kyrgyz, Kazakhstan people, Tajiks and Uzbekistan people, they don't have ones, and in most of the cases. So it's one of the ways to introduce additional measures of control, limiting illegal immigration. And second, the Russian Immigration Service has enhanced its efficiency in the past years, and in many regions they launched broad inspections, issuing fines and penalties to the companies that violate those rules. And in terms of construction sector, agriculture, the situation has become, I wouldn't say tougher, but the control measures are more efficient. Besides, even the nature of foreigners is changing. Even in Poland, earlier, from 6 to 7 airplanes full of Polish immigrants took off and headed for London. Now the situation has changed in Poland. Probably some similar things will happen in Russia. I'm not an expert here, but perhaps preferences of those countries are changing, of the countries from which we received flows of immigrants traditionally. And responding to your question about demographic issues, you know, it's quite a sensitive issue because demographic cycles are long, and Russian political leadership, as any leadership of any country, tries to take the benefits of positive moments of those cycles. But when there is decline in the population growth, and in the 1990s, that decline can be explained by some objective reasons. Similarly, that growth can also be explained by some objective reasons. But some steps taken by the government, such as maternal reimbursement, cheap housing for young parents, they contribute to the growth of the population. and very clearly demographic trends, or just I would say that right measures in social policy contributed to the demographic growth, and those measures do work, and we are quite optimistic about the near future in terms of birth rate and demographic trends. They vary region-wise, but it's the case, and I can see it even in my bank. In VTB 24, we also help young parents. We have some 35,000 employees, and we have 6,000 young mothers having maternity leave. 6,000. So our bank is quite popular in that sense. Girls like to be employed by the bank, work for a couple of years, and then take a maternity leave. So they really think of us as a very loyal employer to young mothers. Okay, Khabarovsk region, please. Marina, ask your question. Thank you very much. I would like to get a clarification. In your presentation said that state-run companies reduce their investments, but what will happen to those investment projects? For instance, Gazprom made a statement that it would build Gazprom and organize the Chemgin gas field, and investments are exorbitant, and the RZD, the Russian railway company, made a statement about the upgrade of the bomb railroad. Well, I showed you the figures and numbers over the past 3 years, and that project, which is called Sila Siberia, or the Force of Siberia, only the memorandum of intentions was signed, so we know nothing about terms, deadlines. So in the best case, works will start by at the end of 2015. So and Gazprom can really do something to invest in the territory of the Russian Federation. So if the gas pipeline is going to be built, it will add to the Russian GDP another 2.5%. As for the Russian Railways company, it's the same. You are quite right naming those major projects. However, we should see and make sure they're coming through, and the investments allocated for Transsib Railroad and BAM Railroad in the amount of about 150 billion, quite significant money. But even the two projects will not break that negative trend. And in Sochi, a lot of infrastructural facilities were built, but they didn't pay back. Let us live and see, but it will start, I think, from 2015, 2016. Dear colleagues, we have our graduate from Kaluga who is here. I'm Sergei Stupnikov. I'm a graduate of 2011. What's your view of the sales of the lease instruments at the end of 2014, 2015? And what is your opinion about the new financial institutions? I'm talking about the lease brokerage. Is it going? Does it have a future in Russia? What lease are you talking about? There is aircraft lease, there is lease of medical equipment. What kind of lease are you talking about? I'm most interested in agriculture. I'm involved in agriculture. You know, the reason I ask that question is that in VTB the rates are one of the lows. I'm not going to promote your bank, but still. I studied all these rates, and in VTB bank rates are the lowest. And really, I'm interested in agricultural projects. In brief, I don't think that most of the audience is interested in agriculture, but lease instruments are really something that we are going to promote, since lease instruments are cheaper than bank loans, and so lease instrument sales will be developed, but it depends on the specific area. For instance, we have a great fleet of rail cars and lease, and it's senseless to increase it because otherwise the ROI will be much lower. We promote aircraft lease, but the lease of agricultural equipment, it's supported by Rosagro leasing branch of Rossельхозbank, and they are facing some problems, to say it politely. And I don't think I can make any optimistic forecasts in there. Other co-lease companies are not matched to Rosagro lease because of their share and abilities, but lease will be very much in demand. Last question will be asked by Denis Greco from the Altai region. Please be brief, Denis. I'm Denis Greco from Altai, and the situation in the banking sector and the economy you told us about, and if we take it as a window of opportunity. So, two questions arise with me. So every time economic reforms are conducted, there is some delayed effect, and they cannot start acting immediately. And what's your assessment of the window of opportunity? How long it will stay open? So that and when will it close? So that the measures you told us about will be useless. You know, that window of opportunity is quite big. And there are always attempts to allocate our reserve funds, welfare funds, domestically. We have large funds. So the government and the central bank have about a year and a half to change their policy, even if reserves are used in the wrong way. So that window of opportunity stays open for quite some time. Speaking of those specific measures, I think they can be taken at a time when things go much worse. Not just bad, but much worse. And it's the case not only with Russia, it happens in a number of countries. So it's only a real crisis that makes authorities take some strong measures. But if I wonder if things may get that worse and much worse, and I told you about the oil prices situation, and but that confrontation with the West is impacting the Russian economy, and it's very negative. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. There will be no more questions. In conclusions, I will take the liberty of saying a couple of words. When I was listening to Mikhail Mikhailovich, I kept on thinking how interesting the economic story could be. And that particular subject can be viewed as not interesting, not very much grasping, but it's wrong. And Mikhail Mikhailovich is not just an experienced economist or prominent banker and a professional. He is also a friend to us, a friend to the school. Yelena Mikhailovna is telling me that he has some positions, but he is a friend to our school, and that is most important, because that is the gentleman who fully realizes what we are doing here, and we are very much grateful to him for that.
Спасибо еще раз вам за внимание. И
Thank you very much for your attention once again. I would like to wish you a very fruitful and instrumental week, both here at the sessions and in your interaction. Thank you, and networking.
У нас в 9 господин Госман, поэтому вовремя, пожалуйста, вы почувствуете себя на воскресном вечере.